This is Nattering with E with your host, Eric Friedlander.
On Saturdays, we listen to Nattering with E because if you're about to hurl from taking a tilt-a-whirl, your ears better be free.
Hey, this is David.
Hey, this is Eric.
Hey, this is SJ.
90s Nostalgia Hour. A Nattering with E solo production. The Vietnam War and Music, 1955 to 1975. Hey, how's it going? It's Eric, as always, in the Nattering with E studio. This week, a solo podcast project starting up next week, actually. This is just a little preview for a podcast about history and music. Two of my favorite things of all time. Things I'm really, really passionate about. As you can tell with the music on my blog, 3 Cheers, and soon for wrestling and books on doodlebrews24.com. Along with 90s Nostalgia Hour, I kind of want to do something on my own too, so we're going to be doing a podcast called Nattering with E, The War in Vietnam Through Music. Essentially, we'll be looking at the 20-year period from 1955, when French colonialists were booted out of Vietnam, to 1975, when North Vietnam was able to capture South Vietnam and take over from American troops and basically democratic troops to bring the country into a full communist nation. During this time, we saw a wide array of political activism, both pro-war and anti-war. We also saw things such as the U.S. coming to more of a world power status. We knew that they were big contenders in the world wars, but a war such as the war on Vietnam really highlighted how the U.S. had gone from just a casual player in world politics to the player. Was the war necessary? Was it unnecessary? Did the U.S. need to get involved? Were other nations involved? We'll delve into all of this during the next year or so of podcasts. I'm going to make this a podcast every Saturday, along with the wrestling podcast that I normally do with Brendan and sometimes with Jordan. Aside from the war itself, we'll be looking at various artists who spoke up against the war and who were for the war. For instance, country music back in the late 1950s to the middle of the 1970s, that 20-year span, was very pro rah-rah America and being pro into the war, while genres such as rock and soul came together to be anti-war. We'll be looking at Woodstock 1969 and its political impact. We'll be looking at various individual artists' discographies during that time, such as Aretha Franklin, Marvin Gaye, The Animals, and Creedence Clearwater, to name a few. We'll also, of course, be looking at Bob Dylan and Jimi Hendrix, as they both played the song All Along the Watchtower. We'll be delving into that in a few weeks. But next week, we're going to be starting off. The year is 1955, and we'll take a look at how the war in Vietnam went from North Vietnamese citizens fighting French colonialists to North Vietnam gaining assistance from Soviet Union communist Russia, along with the U.S. coming to the aid of the South Vietnamese to keep a democratic state. To just see how this part of the world was absolutely impactful on the rest of society back from 1955 to 1975 is something we'll really delve into. We'll also be looking at a little bit of wrestling, because we'd be remiss on Nattering with E not to talk wrestling. And we'll be delving into more of the Gulf War in terms of wrestling's impact on political events from the 1980s. So stay tuned. I hope you join us, and really enjoy this as much as I do. I'll also be reviewing a few books about the subjects of music and the Vietnam War, and we'll just go from there. So I hope you join me, and I'll see you next week.